Okay, so let's now work on making this web page responsive. Let me show you how you can test it on your browser. So if, for example, you're using Google Chrome, what you can do is to inspect the page. So you can right-click, click Inspect, and right on the top here, there's this little icon that says Toggle Device Toolbar. And if you click it, you can look at your web page in dimensions of a phone, for example. Now you can decide which mobile phone or tablet you want to open your web page in and take a look at that. And immediately you will see that there are problems here in terms of design. Now I'm looking at Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra. You can change it to S8 Plus. They have different widths. You can go to iPhone 12 Pro, for example, iPhone SE, and you can just test it on different mobile phones to see how it is going to look. And let's go to Pixel 7, for example. So let's pick one of them and see what are the main changes we need to make in order to make this design mobile friendly, and what changes we need to make for the elements, the positions. Maybe we want to hide some of the elements or remove them. Maybe we want to resize some of the elements, and then we will see what are the maximum widths of mobile phones that we need to adjust the transition for. So let's start with what we have on the screen now. That's Pixel 7. Take a look at this website over here. So immediately you will see there are some problems. On the header side, there is some empty space on the right. And then there's this logo, these two lines, the curved line that we added for a fancy design on the desktop doesn't look so good here. Now you can see that the elements are not centered on the phone. The image is covering most of the width over here. And as you can see, our background, the golden background color is not covering the full width, and there are some problems with the footer as well. So there are some problems to be fixed. Now, here are some of the changes we want to make. First, the first problem I see here is that the width of images are larger than the width of other elements, like this div, the background. If I change the width of images, it is going to fix a lot of problems with the adjustments of the layout, the location, the position of the elements on the screen. So that's one thing I want to do. The other thing we want to do is to remove this curved line, the border we added for the main. So it's no longer necessary. You can just remove it completely on the mobile version. We want to probably resize this slogan part and maybe change the design a little bit for the footer. Okay, so here's the question. Wait a second. You are going to give new design instructions for a web page. We already have a CSS file with all the design instructions. How do you give different design instructions for different width of a device? So the answer is easy. I have already put the code here, but I commented it out so you can see the problems first. So let me show you the code. I will uncomment this part, and you can see that all you need to do is to start your instructions using a media query on the CSS file. And I have written at media screen and a maximum width of 820 pixels. And there is a reason why I picked this number for the maximum width. But whatever maximum width you put here, what it means is any instructions that you put after that are going to be followed for any device with a width less than the number that you specify here. So for example, if you want it to be on screens with a maximum width of 800 pixels, any device less than 800 pixels for the width are going to follow the following rules for the design, not the original ones that we put up here. So that's a really great thing to have. Now, I'll tell you quickly, for the maximum width of 820 was because I wanted to transition between the desktop mode and a mobile phone at a threshold that I found on Google Chrome Inspect page on a tablet. I think it was an iPad. So I checked all of those devices. Some of them were 450 pixels, 600 pixels. The largest one was 820 pixels for the width. And I wanted that to be the threshold after which, or smaller than which, I wanted to go with the new rules down here. So let's take a look at the rules. As I mentioned, the first thing I wanted to change was the width of the main images. I have two images. I gave them IDs. The ID is main image. And if you go back up and take a look at them, you will see that here it is. The main image, this is the display. Let me find the width. We had a width somewhere for them. Let me find the width for the main image. Oh, I remember we did not change the width on the CSS. We went with the original width of the images, which we looked at, if you remember, when we resized the images. So because we didn't specify any particular width in here, the default width of those images is what you have here, which shows 564 pixels for the width by some height. Now, look at this number. 564 pixels might be larger than the pixel size for the width of some of the devices. Okay, so this image could be larger than what the device itself allows the content to be. So that's causing some problem. Now, what I'm going to do is saying adjust the image width on smaller devices, smaller than 820 pixels, adjust the width of the images in a way that they do not exceed 85% of the width of the device. And in order to do that, you can see here in my media query, in the instructions under maximum width of 120 is all of the images with the ID main image, which we have only two of them, change the width of them from whatever it is to 85% of the available screen size. So this is a smart way, because it doesn't depend on the width of the screen directly. You don't give it a, let's say, an exact pixel size for the width. What you are saying is whatever the width of the device is, it could be 800, 600, 700, just make sure the width of the image is 85% of that. Now, why 85%? Why not 100%? Because I want to have some margin on two sides of the image. So I don't want the image to be touching the borders on the right and the left. So I want to have 15% for both sides. So it's basically 7.5% on the left, 7.5% on the right of space. So there should be some margin. Well, this is what I want. You might want to go with 100%. That is also fine. So that's the idea behind changing the width of images. Now, you remember I told you the next thing we wanted to change was to remove the border top, the curved line. And that's how we designed it on the main. We gave it a border top with some border radius. All I need to do to make it invisible for small devices is to say for devices that are less than 820 pixels, just make sure that border top is none for my main element. So this will make sure that that line is no longer visible for these devices. The next thing is the paragraphs under the main section, and I had the same issue with them. If you remember, for the paragraphs, we gave them an exact 500 pixel for the width of them. Here it is. So for the main P, we set the width of those paragraphs to be 500 pixels. But here, you might end up having a device that is less than 500 pixels wide. So I did the same thing that I did with the image for the paragraphs. I said, if the device is a wide, large screen, fine, go with whatever I wanted. But as soon as the device is less than 820 pixels in width, what I want you to do is to change the width of those paragraphs to 80% and also give them some, reduce the margin to 1 EM. If you remember, we had more margin on the top. Again, to remind you, I will go to take a look at this margin here, and you can see that for both the images and for the paragraphs of the main, we had 4 EM margin for top and the bottom and 1.5 margin for left and right. I have reduced all of them to 1 EM because on a mobile device, that 4 EM would mean that there is a big difference, big distance between those elements when you look at them in the vertical way. So if you have to scroll a lot to go to the next element. So I want them to be a little bit closer. So I reduce that number to 1 EM. I also reduced the font size for the slogan, as I mentioned, and then I tried to fix the footer and the footer icons. So the footer icons, if you remember, we put them in a way that they are covering the half right side of the footer. But on a mobile device, you don't have a lot of width. So what I want to do on a mobile device is to push them down to the next line. So I have changed the display from inline block to block, which means my copyright and my social media icons are no longer going to be side by side. They're going to be copyright first on the first line, social media icons on the second line, and I gave 90% width of the device to both of them, and I wanted them to appear at the center of the screen. Also, I reduced the margin and the font size for the social media icons on the footer. And finally, I adjusted the header H1 size. That the Lotus Flower Bakery was too large originally, so I had to make it a little bit smaller, and the same thing for the navigation items. Basically, I reduced the font size from 3 EM to 1 EM for H1 and from 1 EM to 0.8 EM for nav. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this file. Let's take a look at the changes. So this is before those changes. As you can see, the images are too wide. That causes these elements not to be at the center. These lines don't make sense anymore. This yellow background color is not covering the whole page because the width of the text is larger, 500 pixels, than the width available here. The images, and we have a little bit of a mess for the footer. Now, as a result of all of those changes, if I refresh my page, you will see, now look at that. Everything is in perfect order. I'll review that from the top. You can see I have my page title on the top. I have the menu showing up stacked on top of each other. They're no longer in the middle, they're on the right side. Now my logo is perfectly aligned in the middle, in the center, and then I have my slogan a little bit smaller than before, where it should be. Then I have the image that is covering 85% of the available width, whatever width that is. Then I have my text. I have my yellow background being 100% of the device. I have the text, I have my button, I have the other image, and look at the footer. Instead of just trying to squeeze everything in one line, we have two separate lines, the copyright line and the social media icons line underneath that. And all of them are text aligned center. So this is a way more beautiful design for a mobile device. And now let's test it on a different phone. So I'll go to iPhone 12 Pro. It's a little bit wider. Go to 12 Pro Max. It's a bit wider, so you can see the slogan is now in one line, but everything else is, again, aligned beautifully. You can take a look at that in iPad Air, and you can see the effects are here. You can look at that on, let's say, iPhone SE. And one more. Let's take a look at it at Surface Pro 7, which is really wide. It's wider than 820 pixels. As you can see, it is 912 pixels wide. So we still have the lines because it's following the design from the original design on the desktop. Now, if you don't like it, you can easily change the threshold from 820 pixels and less to 912 pixels and less. So it's completely up to you. Do you want to include this Surface Pro 7 as a desktop design, or do you want to include it as a mobile design, or do you even want to create a third design for tablets and smaller desktops? So that is another possibility. For that, all you need to do is to add another media query with the instructions for that particular width. Now, it's up to you whether you want to have multiple designs, 3-4 designs for different devices, or just go with 2 designs, most of the phones less than a particular width, and all larger desktops or tablets more than that particular threshold that you decide. So that's the idea of making your web page responsive. And now our web page is responsive for a version 1. Again, we can come back to this later. We can add particular design rules for desktops at certain width, tablets and phones by adding more media query. But for now, because this is going to be just a first sample for the client and we're going to use their feedbacks, we will see what they want for the design of the page, both for the desktop and the mobile, and then we will come back with more information about what they want and we can add more to that. So that's for the responsive design.